So with this, I'm very proud and to have Sumant. Sumant is our partner. He was the inspiration behind the fabric. When we sold our last company and he said, going to retire, and Sumant said, yeah, you're too young to retire. I like that. So Sumant here will give a landscape of the investment world, which is the lifeblood of all the companies that are started. So Sumant.
Thanks, Rajan. Do you have the pointer? So, I do this every year at this annual Fabric event, talk a little bit about what makes this business work, the money that comes through the system and how that's looking. Just to also introduce myself to those that don't know me, I'm hoping that's a minority here. I'm guessing it's a minority here. I also am a co-founder of March Capital, which is a venture fund, along with Jim, who's sitting here in the audience. Actually, anecdotally, Jim hired me into this business, so in some ways, he's still my boss. What's happening in the VC market? I also had another thought when I was listening to the talks right now. I said, maybe rather than talking about the money part of it, why don't I talk a little bit about what it is to work with, how it is to work with the Fabric? And it generally goes like this. You call Rajan, and he'll be on some Bluetooth somewhere, and you say, I'm in the car. And before you say anything, Prabhakar's here with me. How many of you have had that experience? They are always together. I wonder what they do. So what's happening in venture capital? I'll tell you what's happening. It's been a really, really good time for this industry. There's a lot of money in the system. There's a lot of fundraising going on. There's a lot of exits going on. But there's also some significant changes, and I think the Fabric is a good representation of some of those changes, and we'll talk a little bit about them. So the amount of money that's been invested in technology this year is probably going to beat the record of last year, which was a record for many, many years, the last 10 years. So things are on the up. Now, the difference is that this amount is being driven by fewer, larger deals. And I think that you see it in the news. You see it, probably 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, if you had an exit at around $1 billion of equity, you would sort of think yourself very special. And today, you're looking at companies that are being built and seeing enterprise values of tens of billions of dollars and funds being raised, which are quote unquote hundreds of billions of dollars. So the industry has changed. And that's also reflected in the early stages. And before the entrepreneurs here start thinking about renegotiating their Series A's and asking for higher prices, it really is a representation of the fact that the early money that's going into building these companies is not coming from venture funds. It's either coming from people who are writing checks themselves as angels or coming from entities like the Fabric who are building companies, giving the first 2, 3, 4, 5 million. In fact, I met an entrepreneur day before yesterday who raised, and Pankaj knows this guy from New York, which was astounding. He raised a seed round of $10 million. So how the heck is that a seed round? What was the valuation? It was a 90 million pre. It's like, whoa, what? And then he's raised a Series A of $55 million. It's a Series A of 55. And he's just raising a Series C, $600 million valuation, $100 million plus raise, and his revenue is less than 2 million. It's incredible. So it is a very interesting market. On the flip side, he shall remain nameless. I will not tell anyone. The exits have been very good too. One big change in the exit scenario, there are now these groups of, somewhat resembling bygone eras of buyout/private equity funds that are focused on technology. And that group has seen, I would say, the biggest amount of new money that's flowing into the exit scenarios of technology companies, sort of like a Vista Partners or a Thoma Bravo and others like them, Silver Lake here in the Bay Area. Silicon Valley is no longer just the only place this is happening, and I'm just bringing these two slides in there just to give you a little context. I was in Asia 10 days ago and meeting with a bunch of entrepreneurs, India and China. India is actually not that, it's way different story there now than it was 5 years ago. But if you look at the size of the market in that part of the world, it's astounding. And what that's leading to is I would say, equity value creation that I think actually is in some ways more than the venture ecosystem here in the US has seen in the last decade or so. So, when does this story end? This has been one of the longest, strongest bull markets on the equity side ever. And there's probably arguments to be made for why, logical arguments, and I'm happy to listen to them because they play into my story. And that's the argument I give people who I ask for money for the fund. But it is a little bit of a sanity check right now. If you look at the area the Fabric's focused on, this is not my slide. This is another venture fund that does a lot of work here. That part of the market, so software normally grows 2x the GDP of any country, especially the US. And cloud is probably the fastest growing part of the software ecosystem. But it's still not necessarily the largest. It's actually quite a small part of the software ecosystem. So the question we keep asking ourselves is how long it will last. Hopefully, it'll probably last next 12 to 24 months if you ask most people. But if you'd asked them 12 to 24 months ago, they would have given you the same answer. So the real answer is no one knows. Trends, I think we went through all of this, but when I sort of started investing, and every company would come pitch us would be the next internet company. So 99, 2000 would be, I'm the internet company for pets, I'm the internet company for cars. And Jim was probably an investor in all of those. 2005, 6, everybody was a mobile company. 2010, I think till now, 2010 was probably more we're a big data company. Now everyone's an AI company. So I think you see these trends, and I think they're all real, but not every company is what they say they are. They're just trying to sort of position themselves in where the waves are. Having said that, tremendous amount of efficiencies that have been created because of these new technologies in a lot of different spaces. The new buzzwords, fog and edge, IoT, serverless, multi-cloud. I think we've heard a lot about all of this today, so I'll kind of skip over them. I will leave you with this one thought. Cloud, some statistics that I've heard, cloud workloads are still less than 10% of all workloads in an enterprise. Cloud software revenues are still 10% of software revenues, growing really fast, but still a long way to go. So if you look at this, I think the Fabric probably will exist at least for the next few years. Thank you.